Hi, and welcome to a Jim2 training video. Today, we'll be exploring vendor stock feeds and how we can save you time in your business. Vendor stock feeds are designed to save you time by making the process of updating your vendor pricing as quick as possible. We do have multiple ways of performing this task, so I'll be taking you through each of the methods: automated stock feeds, 4.4 manual stock feeds, and some common features between them both. Please note that automated stock feeds are an additional licensed product, so if you wish to know more, please contact our sales team. To set up vendor stock feeds, you'll need the following: access to Jest configuration. Please note, access to Jest configuration is not yet available for our cloud customers, so if you're on a cloud solution and would like to set this up, please get in touch with our support team. A card code set up as a vendor in Jim2, access to create email rules, a file from your vendor that contains the vendor stock code for each piece of stock, and the related vendor stock code must be entered against the stock code in Jim2 on its vendor tab. Automated stock feeds are the ultimate way of keeping on top of your vendor changing prices. To begin, open the Jim2 Configuration Manager. Locate the entry for your database labeled with Jess at the start, right-click, and then click Configure. If B2B in or stock feeds is not present in the available list of modules, click Add. Locate the stock feed or B2B in the list, click OK. This is where we'll find our first piece of configuration. We'll need to set the setting Feed Immediate to True. And we'll also need to nominate a directory for Jim2 to find the stock feed files. This directory will serve as Jess's working directory, so your security should allow the Jess process through, but no users outside of administrators. You can also add exclusion times, as you may not wish to have this run while operating. The process can be performance intensive depending on the size of the files being used and the amount of rules that need to be applied to the import. We recommend setting this to outside of your business hours so that you do not have performance issues while the data is being imported. I'll add the start of my exclusion times as 6 a.m. because sometimes I come into work early, and I'll end the exclusion zone at about 1900 hours or 7 p.m. as sometimes I work a little bit late after closing as well. Next, we can click Feeds to set up the individual stock feeds. We can start by clicking Add New, and then selecting the type of file that we receive from our vendor. We have functionality for XML and CSV. Today, I'll be using Dicker Data as an example, and they use XML, but you can choose CSV, and these steps will remain the same. Next, we need to give the feed a name. I think it makes sense to name it in line with the supplier we're setting it up for. I will name this the same as the card code for my vendor to make it nice and clear. I'll enter the same code in the field below. This is where Jim knows to look to find which vendor this feed is for. We will also need to tick directory so that Jim2 knows that it should look in the specified directory to find the files it needs. Next, we have to add a file name expression. This needs to be a common string of characters that is unique to the stock feed file's name that you're looking to process. This is what Jim2 will use to locate the correct file for this stock feed. For example, my stock file from Dicker Data always has the phrase data feed in it. So I'll add that as the file name expression. If you only wish to include some of the file's name, you can place a full stop and asterisk at the start and end of your file name expression. This lets Jim2 know that there may be other characters before and after the string of characters that you've selected. If you're setting up multiple vendor stock feeds, please ensure that the name expression is not present on any others. Directory pickup should be a different directory to the previous screen. In this setting, we want to put a directory that staff will have access to so that they can manually drop sheets of vendor data on an ad hoc basis. I'll add a directory that I've set up with security for any staff that perform this function. Be aware that this is only required if you have staff or external programs that will need to be adding manual files to this folder location. If you do not have this need, you can leave this field blank. Next, you'll need to select the mapping file. These are files that show Jim2 which columns in your vendors file contains which information. Different vendors will have their price lists set up in different ways, and not all of them will be suitable. So, if the vendor that you're using is not amongst the pre-prepared mapping sheets, please contact support with an update sheet to see if it's suitable. From here, we click Save and Save. We then get a message letting us know that Jess must be restarted for any save changes to take effect. To do this, we simply stop, wait for the message, and then start again. If something is wrong with the configuration of the vendor stock feed, you'll have a lot of red text appear when starting Jess. If you're unable to determine why the red text is appearing, you can contact our support department for assistance. Next, we need to set up an email rule so that Jim2 knows that when it sees the right combination of subject line and sender, Jim knows to look for that email for the stock feed information. To do this, we go to Email and then Email Rules. And then we click New. First, we'll tick Sender Contains, and then we'll enter the email address that the stock feed will be coming from. I'll use Dicker Data as an example again, so for this, I'll enter noreply@dickerdata.com. We may then get other emails from that email address, so we should also add a condition to check the subject. We'll tick Subject Contains, and then enter something common to the vendor's emails that contain the stock feed attachment. I know that Dicker Data always send their emails with the subject Dicker Data Stock Data Feeds. Now that we have the conditions entered, click Next. We'll need to scroll to the bottom to find the entry Process Stock Feed. Click Add, and then enter the same stock feed name here as you had entered in Jess earlier. From here, we can simply click Next. We must give the rule a name. In this case, Dicker Data Stock Feed. And we'll also tick Stop Other Rules if this rule is run. Doing this will make sure you don't accidentally get other rules applying to the stock feed emails. It's also a good idea to have this towards the top of your email rule execution plan. And there you have it. From this point on, whenever we receive an email from this vendor, the email rule will let Jess know to look at it for processing. Jess will then take the attachment from the email and then push the information contained in it into the database. To confirm this has occurred, you can click eBusiness and then check the eBusiness transactions. By running this list, you can find the successful import entries. We can now offer a manual method, which does not need to be licensed, to import vendor stock feeds. While on the eBusiness tab in Jim2, click Import Vendor Stock Prices. You'll be prompted to select the file that you would like to import. Once this is selected, you'll be taken to the mapping screen. The first thing to do is select which vendor this sheet is for. You can also make decisions about if you should keep to an import schedule or ignore it and apply the sheet immediately. At the top of the screen is the mapping options, with the bottom of the screen showing a preview of the spreadsheet. Before you start setting up the mapping, take a look at the preview. If the first line on the sheet is a header row, you can tick First row is a heading. Also, if you have some blank space before where the stock is listed, you can tell Jim to skip that number of rows. Make sure you click Load Columns after you have set these two settings, as when you do, Jim2 will know not to import the first lines of the spreadsheet. You can then use the mapping window at the top to tell Jim2 which column refers to which field. This can take some time depending on how many columns you need to map, so just to the left of the mapping window is the save area. From here, you can enter a name to save the mapping as, and then click Save. This means that from this point on, you'll not need to map the fields and columns. Instead, you can use the drop-down to bring back a set of saved mappings to save you time next time you receive a spreadsheet from the same vendor. Once these settings are set and you've completed the mapping, you can then click Import. Depending on if you chose to follow the import schedule or not, your import will execute accordingly. The schedule that's being referred to is the period outside of the exclusion times that we'd previously set in Jess. By going to the eBusiness tab and then selecting Vendor Stock Feeds, you'll be able to find some features that are common to both automated and manual import methods. When you open the feature, you'll first be presented with a list of all product groups that you've set up. You can change this to brands using the radial buttons found in the top left. These radial buttons will change the groupings of stock in the left-hand navigation pane, which will allow you to see the stock associated with brands or groups. There is a tab at the top of the window called My Stock that will show all items that you have already existing in Jim2. You can also show the stock associated with a vendor by clicking All Suppliers tab at the top and then the Suppliers tab underneath the navigation pane. By right-clicking on a supplier in the navigation pane and then selecting Open Supplier, you can then see all items that have come from that supplier in a tab at the top of the window. As you browse through the folders on the left to see the stock on the right, you'll notice that some of the items are entered as blue and some are black. The blue entries are for stock that you already have in your system that is matched with the vendor stock feed that you've imported. The black entries show the stock that was in the stock feed but has not matched in your system. By right-clicking on a blue entry, you'll find an option to navigate directly to the stock code from this list. And if you right-click on a black entry, you'll be able to either create a new Jim2 stock code or associate it to an existing Jim2 stock code. You can also use the stock that has been provided as part of the stock feed but is not yet in Jim2 to include in quotes. If you right-click and create Jim2 stock, you will find that it will be created first as virtual stock. Virtual stock is essentially a placeholder for a stock line that you wish to quote, but do not yet wish to commit as a full Jim2 stock item. This means that you can quote any of the lines that your supplier has provided, and if the quote is accepted, you can then choose to turn the virtual stock into a more full stock record. Finally, you can choose what will be updated or not updated from the stock sheet by clicking on the button labeled Rules at the bottom of the window. A window will appear that will let you add or remove the rules that you have set up. You can also tell the rule set which rules to apply in which order using the precedence column. To create a new rule, we'll click Add. From here, you are able to see the conditions for when an update should occur on the left, and then set which information should be updated on the right. You can limit when something is imported based on the vendor that it came from, the brand group it exists in, stock groups that it may exist in, and you can even specify a single stock code if you wish. In most cases, you won't need a vendor and you will tick Update Price List and click Save. This rule now means that if a stock feed is imported, it will update the list price for any vendor's feed that is processed. Please use caution when applying a rule in this manner. If your stock is set to use list price, you're effectively allowing your vendor to dictate your pricing. By using these rules in a combination with the vendor stock feed imports, you can ensure that your stock is always up to date.